Civilization III was released in October of 2001, developed by Jeff Briggs and Soren Johnson. Civ III marked a critical evolution in the renowned Civilization franchise, one of the most successful strategy game franchise out there. As a third installment in the legendary 4X titles, Civ III pushed the boundaries of what a turn-based strategy game could achieve. It introduced groundbreaking gameplay mechanics such as culture, strategic resources, unique civilization traits, and far more complex diplomatic system. In this video, we will explore the development, the gameplay design, and the impact and legacy of this game, analyzing as to why it remains one of the most important strategy games ever made. The Civilization series began in 1991 with Sid Meier's Civilization, offering the players a chance to guide a civilization from the dawn of history into the space age. Its core loop is a turn-based decision-making, empire expansion, technological progression, and diplomacy become the template for all the 4X games that have come after. Civ II expanded the formula with improved graphics, interface, and deeper systems. So naturally, by 2001, the expectations for Civilization III were much more immense. Firaxis Games, formed by Sid Meier and former Microprose developers, sought to elevate the series with Civ III by addressing some of the limitations of the earlier titles and introducing new systems that would make the civilization feels more dynamic and alive. At its core, Civilization III tasked the player with building and managing a civilization from 4000 BC through the modern era. Soren Johnson, one of the lead designer of Civilization III and the AI designer of Civilization III, was tasked to manage the project late into the development. And he has done a fantastic job at reorganizing the core mechanics of what Civ II built. One of the major significant innovations was the culture system, which assigned culture value to cities based on buildings and wonders. Cultural strength determined a city's ability to exert influence over surrounding territories, expanding borders and potentially flipping enemy cities peacefully. This system gave a new meaning to city planning and added a soft power elements to the empire building system. The player can now win the game without even going to war, which was not possible in previous entries. Civ III introduced strategic resources like iron, oil, or uranium, to the luxury resources such as gems, silk, spices. To build advanced units or wonders, a civilization needed to access to relevant strategic resources. This shift in gameplay added a tons of new layer of strategic planning. Player had to prioritize acquiring new resources by trading or conquering land with specific resources. It gave a new incentive to the players to conquer new land and develop their empire even bigger than ever. It turned the resource acquisition into a central geopolitical objectives and made trade routes and diplomacy more meaningful. Each civilization now has two unique traits. It can be anything like militaristic, commercial, scientific, or industrialistic. A unique trait that replaced a standard one with improved stats or abilities. As a result, Civ 3 has added distinct personalities to Civilization and encouraged diverse playstyles. For example, the Roman with their militaristic and commercial traits had advantages in conquest and economy. This system encouraged replayability and deeper strategic variations. Diplomacy in Civ 3 was far more advanced than Civ 2. Player can now negotiate deals involving technologies, resources, the lump sum amount of per turn's gold, and militaristic alliances. These are all extremely important gameplay systems. As a result, trading and diplomacy has become a crucial tool for peace and war. Even though the system itself is very video gamey and very abused system, it still has a lot of incentives to play around with. Although not perfect, it laid a groundwork for more advanced system in near future installments. But as a result, the system itself is good in my opinion. Even though Soren Johnson, the lead developer of Civ 3, says that the bargaining table was a mistake, I don't feel like that. I feel like that the bargaining system is little bit overpowered in Civ 3, but it needed just a fine tuning, which has been done in the future entries. Player can now adopt different types of government, such as monarchy, republic, democracy, and communism. Each offers different bonuses and drawbacks. A rather controversial addition was the corruption and the waste system, which were used to limit the efficiency of distant cities. This system was intended to prevent the infinite city sprawl, which is a gameplay system that designed around making more and more cities and pushing for more wider type of gameplay. However, this corruption system often frustrated players who found the empire growth to be artificially constrained, and the system is much more obtuse than any other entries. And player often feels like the system was much more obtuse, with player not knowing how much they would lose when they settle another cities. However, this system does add some form of realism into the sprawling civilization, but as the gameplay changes, it was not that received well. One of the more major drawbacks of corruption system is that it is very micromanaging. As a result, it was later removed from the Civilization franchise. In terms of visual and audio and interfaces, for its time, Civilization 3 presented a clean and colorful isometric visual styles. To be honest, I much prefer this type of visual style over Civ 4's more ugly type of art style in my opinion. The map tiles were far more detailed than previous entries, with clean user interface and a clean layout on the map that you can just look at and recognize everything without even needing to switch on the resource tiles. City reflected their culture group like Asian, Middle Eastern, adding a much more immersive variety. The soundtrack composed by Mark Cromer adapted dynamically to different eras. The soundtracks were so good that Civ 4 basically copied the soundtrack from Civ 3 without adding too much, and I fully support this notion because Civ 3 has some of the best soundtracks in the game. The user interface, while functional, do have some clutteredness to it. In terms of micromanagement, it becomes a huge issue in managing large empires. But the UI and the art style is very clean much better than Civ 4 in my opinion in this area. Don't get me wrong, I like Civ 4 very much more than Civ 3, but this is one area that Civ 3 has clear advantage over Civ 4 because the game is in 2D and it doesn't require that much of the computer space and that much of an performance issues compared to Civ 4. The expansions also added some much required variety to the overall game. The Play the World expansion that was released in 2002 introduced multiplayer. Those who may not realize that Civ 3 in vanilla state did not have a multiplayer mode. Additional civilization and scenarios were also being introduced in that expansions. One of the most widely criticized aspect of this expansion was its technical problems and limited improvements. Although these were much more fixed in the next expansion, that is Conquest in 2003, which addressed many complaints, added new civilization wonders and government types like feudalism and fascism. And Conquest also improved the AI behavior by taking into account number of criticism from the fan base. The expansion also introduced historical scenarios like the rise of Rome and the age of discovery. Overall, the Conquest was much better received and has become essential for a Civ 3 experience. Overall, I do recommend Civ 3 Complete Edition, which bundled both the base game and both the expansions, and it remains the most recommended version for players today. So, in conclusion, Sid Meier's Civilization 3 was a bold leap forward for the entire 4X genre. Its cultural mechanics, resource dependency, and civilization diversity set a new standard for what strategies games could be going forward. Though the game is not without its flaws, like the AI behavior, which is quite random and sometimes unreasonable, the game still remains one of the foundational titles in the strategy gaming history. 20 years later, Civ 3 continues to be studied, played, and remembered not just as a game but as a turning point in the strategy games genre.